We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. We show up when power gets sloppy, when ego turns into policy, and when the people in charge start confusing intimidation with leadership. And right now, Donald Trump is having a catastrophic day as GOP senators turn against him because his latest stunt is backfiring so hard, it is shaking the foundation of the economy itself. It is Monday morning, and Trump is spiraling. The plan was simple, in the way all authoritarian plans are simple. Find a target, scream crime, point the Justice Department like a weapon, and force obedience through fear. This time, he aimed the DOJ at the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell, the man Trump himself appointed, and Trump wanted a criminal investigation to punish him, humiliate him, and pressure him. But instead of Powell being the one under fire, Republicans are now demanding an investigation not into Powell, but into Trump's Department of Justice for weaponization. Let that sink in. Republicans demanding a criminal investigation into the DOJ for criminally investigating Jerome Powell. Trump tried to turn the justice system into his personal attack dog, and now even members of his own party are looking at that dog and asking who slipped it poison. And while that backlash explodes, Trump does what Trump always does when reality hits him. He runs to social media and starts posting like a man trying to hypnotize the public with his own delusions. He posts, "I'm the one who saved NATO President DJT. Saved NATO." This is the same Donald Trump who is now threatening to invade Greenland, an autonomous territory tied to Denmark, a NATO ally. This is the same Trump whose threats are so reckless that NATO nations are openly talking about positioning forces in Greenland to protect it from a United States invasion. Trump is doing more to crack NATO's unity than any American president in modern history, and he is bragging that he saved it. This is not leadership. This is a tantrum with nukes in the background. And then, as if the morning was not unhinged enough, Trump posts about being the acting president of Venezuela. Not a joke in the normal sense, a power fantasy. A troll post dressed up like imperial policy. And the response is immediate. Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar says it out loud, in the way everyone is thinking it. Trump is posting about being acting president of Venezuela when he is not even acting like a president at home. That is for sure. Because at home, he is acting like what he has always been, a man who cannot tolerate independence, cannot tolerate institutions, and cannot tolerate anyone telling him no. So now the grown-ups respond. Former chairs of the Federal Reserve and former Treasury secretaries release a statement on Monday defending Jerome Powell after the Justice Department opened this criminal investigation. And look at the names. Ben Bernanke, who served 2 terms as Fed chair. Jared Bernstein, chair of the Council of Economic Advisers under Biden. Jason Furman, chair of the Council of Economic Advisers under Obama. Timothy Geithner, Treasury Secretary under Obama, and also President and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Alan Greenspan, Glenn Hubbard, Jacob Lew, Henry Paulson, a Republican, Bush's guy. A lineup that spans parties, administrations, ideologies, and decades, and their message is devastating because it is not partisan. It is structural. It is about whether the United States is still a serious country. They say the Federal Reserve's independence and the public's perception of that independence are critical for economic performance, including achieving the goals Congress set for the Fed: stable prices, maximum employment, and moderate long-term interest rates. They call the reported criminal inquiry into Fed Chair Jay Powell an unprecedented attempt to use prosecutorial attacks to undermine that independence. They say this is how monetary policy is made in emerging markets with weak institutions, with highly negative consequences for inflation and the functioning of their economies more broadly. And they say it has no place in the United States, whose greatest strength is the rule of law, which is the foundation of economic success. That is not a normal statement. That is a flashing red alarm from the people who helped steer the world's largest economy. And then the rebellion spreads inside Trump's own party. As mentioned, Republican Senator Thom Tillis says there needs to be an investigation into the Department of Justice because its independence and credibility are now in question. And of course it is. Under this regime, the DOJ is being treated like Trump's personal vengeance machine. Tillis goes further. He says he is holding up Trump's nominees in the Department of Homeland Security because Kristi Noem refuses to show up before Congress. And he says he will put a hold on anyone Trump wants to appoint to the Fed, whether it is the Fed chair vacancy or any other Fed position. Tillis is on the Senate Banking Committee. He says until this matter is legally resolved, he is blocking it. Then Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski drops her own statement after speaking with Chair Powell that morning. She says it is clear the administration's investigation is nothing more than an attempt at coercion. She says if the DOJ believes an investigation into Powell is warranted based on project cost overruns, which are not unusual, then Congress needs to investigate the Department of Justice. The stakes are too high to look the other way. If the Federal Reserve loses its independence, the stability of markets and the broader economy will suffer. And she says Tillis is right to block any Federal Reserve nominee until this is resolved. That is not a small crack. That is a structural fracture. Because Trump cannot function without fear. And the first thing fear requires is obedience. And now, in public, Republican senators are saying no. So what do other MAGA Republicans do when confronted with the consequences of their own mess? They pretend it is a joke. MAGA Republican Senator Roger Marshall shrugs and says he does not think Trump was being serious about the criminal investigation into Powell. He says Trump is trolling. Just trolling. Like launching the machinery of federal prosecution is a meme. And you can hear it in the clip, the routine. The host asks whether Jay Powell broke the law, misled the Senate Banking Committee, or whether this is political because Trump calls Powell stupid and complains about interest rates. And Marshall basically says, let the system play through. There are bigger issues. Maybe the president is trolling. A grand jury subpoena is trolling. Weaponized prosecution is trolling. Economic sabotage is trolling. That is where we are. Then comes Kevin Hassett, Trump's national economic advisor, a man many believe Trump wants to install as the next Fed chair. It would be disastrous. This is a guy who has been wrong about almost everything for his entire career, and he shows up to sell obedience as virtue. Hassett says if someone launched a criminal investigation into him, he would not be worried. He would welcome it. He would just hand over documents, show emails, prove he is fine. And he says that is what he expects from government employees, that inspectors general look at you, check you, and you show everything is on the up and up. Do you hear the trick? He is trying to normalize the idea that the White House can sic prosecutors on the central bank, and if you do not like it, you must be hiding something. That is not accountability. That is coercion with a smile. And then Trump's other top economic guy, Peter Navarro, barges in like a flamethrower. He blames Joe Biden and Jay Powell for inflation, tells people to spare him the Fed independence stuff, calls the Fed politicized, and says Powell is the worst chairman since Arthur Burns was running the money pump for Richard Nixon's re-election. He demands to get to the bottom of it. And then with a straight face he claims there is a lot of good stuff going on with Trump. Meanwhile, Trump's allies are doing something even more disgusting. They are going on morning shows trying to defend the killing of Renee Nicole Good and the atrocities being committed by Trump's ICE and Border Patrol forces, described by critics as paramilitary tactics in American communities. And Trump's magic trick is always the same. Flip the blame, demand arrests of the people who are not doing the violence, turn the victims into villains, turn accountability into revenge. So they go on television and say what really needs to happen is accountability and arrests, but not for the agent who pulled the trigger. No, they say Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey should be arrested because they are inflaming the situation, because they are demonizing ICE, because they are supposedly provoking anger. Or maybe, just maybe, people are angry because ICE and Border Patrol have been invading communities, arresting hard-working people trying to survive, and acting with impunity. Maybe that is why the anger exists. You hear it in the clip with MAGA Republican Congresswoman Sherry Biggs. She says Mayor Jacob Frey and Governor Tim Walz are inflaming the situation by demonizing ICE. Then she asks if it is long past due for these Democratic officials to be charged for inciting violence against federal agents, and whether Congress can do something to hold them accountable. That is the playbook. Criminalize dissent. Arrest officials who refuse to praise the crackdown. Call criticism incitement. Call accountability violence. Then Democratic Senator Mark Warner goes on CNBC and punctures the propaganda in a way that makes the hosts squirm. He talks about training. He says ICE used to take 5 to 6 months to get trained. Now the training period has been lowered to 47 days. Why 47 days? Because Donald Trump is the 47th president. Tell me that is rational. And the host tries to dodge it. But Warner keeps pushing. Then Warner expands it to Trump's never-ending wars and unauthorized military actions. He talks about a massive U.S. naval presence off the coast of Venezuela. He points out that the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford, supposed to be in the Middle East, is off Venezuela. He asks if the fleet is going to stay there for 2 years, while Venezuela's oil infrastructure gets rebuilt. He asks what the costs are. He reminds everyone of the promise. It is not going to cost us a dime. Venezuelan oil is going to pay for it all. He says he does not know if that is happening. He reminds the audience Trump was supposed to be the peace guy, and then he lists the pattern: intervention in Syria, Iraq, Iran, Yemen, Nigeria, Venezuela, and now maybe Greenland, where Trump would blow up NATO. Warner points out that other nations are responding, the Brits and the Germans putting troops in Greenland to send a message: do not attack Denmark, another NATO ally. He asks how any of this leads to price stability, bringing down costs, while Trump launches a frontal attack on the independence of the Fed. And finally, there is Thom. She did a disastrous interview with Jake Tapper, and one moment stands out because it tells you everything about the moral rot. She has shown video of ICE agent Jonathan Ross, the man accused in the killing of Renee Nicole Good. After shooting, a voice curses at her, calling her an obscene insult. Tapper asks if that is Agent Ross's voice. Thom says she cannot determine which one it is, but it could be. And the reaction, the smirk, the casualness, the almost amused posture in the face of a dead American citizen is what happens when power stops pretending it has a conscience. So that is Trump's Monday morning. A DOJ probe into the Fed chair that triggers condemnation from former Fed leaders and Treasury chiefs, Republican senators threatening to block Fed nominees, MAGA defenders trying to laugh it off as trolling, White House advisors normalizing prosecution as just how government works, allies blaming local officials instead of violent enforcement, a Homeland Security chief shrugging at a vile slur caught on video. And on top of all that, Trump posting fantasies about saving NATO while threatening actions that could shatter it, and claiming he is acting president of Venezuela while failing to act like a president at home. This is not strength. This is a system bending under a man who cannot stand limits. And here is the question for you watching this. How many institutions can one ego try to break at the same time before the whole thing snaps? We are anonymous. We do not ask you to worship a party. We ask you to watch the pattern. Share this. Speak up, demand accountability, and if you want updates as this story keeps unfolding, hit subscribe, because this is not the end, it is the trajectory. Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber. You will get daily recaps, ad-free episodes, and exclusive content. We will keep you posted every step of the way.